When the police knocked on my door to tell me my wife was dead, I had no idea it was just the beginning of the nightmare. Because she wasn't dead. She had erased me, and what I discovered after that changed forever the way I see love, truth, and revenge. I was in the garage, my hands black with grease, when someone knocked on the door. I lived in a small building near Michigan Avenue in Chicago, and it was pouring that October Saturday. I was working on my old car, noisy and generous with oil, and for once, I was happy just tinkering. The radio was playing old rock songs, and I felt younger than my 42 years. That knock wasn't from a neighbor coming for a beer. It was 3 sharp official knocks that sliced through the sound of the garage like a whistle. I wiped my hands on a worn-out rag and opened the door. Standing there was a soaked officer, looking grim, as if the rain had whispered bad news to him before he even spoke. "Sir, I'm Officer Collins," he said without smiling. I acted stupid the way I always do when I'm nervous, and replied, "What do you want?" His voice stayed cold. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Your wife was killed in a car accident about an hour ago." My heart shot into my throat. I almost shouted, not from pain, but from total confusion. "No," I said, because my brain refused to believe it. "Rachel is upstairs. She's sleeping. She had a headache." Collins stared at me, and his face took on an expression I'll never forget. He looked like a man repeating something he learned in police school, but wished he'd never have to say in real life. "We have a positive identification," he said. "The car was registered in her name. We found her purse and ID." I dragged myself up the stairs, knowing deep down that something was wrong, but still clinging to hope. The bedroom was dark. The curtains were drawn, shutting out the gray Chicago light. I called out, "Rachel, honey, there's an officer here to see you." The curtain moved slightly, and a blonde silhouette lay there, just like always. I turned on the lamp with a triumphant smile. "See? I told you." I froze. The officer had already raised his flashlight, his posture changing instantly. "Step back," he ordered. My smile vanished. There was no human warmth in the room, no breathing, no sound, just a chilling stillness. It wasn't Rachel. It was a mannequin. My stomach dropped. Someone had dressed that thing in her pajamas, put on her jewelry, and arranged her blonde hair exactly like hers. They'd even copied the small scar she had on her wrist. I stood there, frozen, unable to comprehend the absurd, cruel gesture. The officer spoke calmly. "Mr. Miller, would you like to explain where your wife is?" The question knocked the air out of me. I tried to remember that morning, our habits, the coffee she grabbed on North LaSalle, her purse on the table, the cold kiss at dawn. The way she kissed me felt strange that morning, distant. I blamed it on the headache. But now everything made sense. Too much sense. The neighbors started peeking through their windows, curious like moths drawn to a light. Tom, from across the street, pretended to rake his yard, but he was recording everything on his phone. The officer called for backup and a crime scene unit. I felt trapped in a noir movie, only this was my life. I felt stupid for laughing earlier. Humor had been my first shield. Now only emptiness remained. The police began asking the usual questions. Marital problems, money issues, enemies. I admitted our marriage was tired. We'd been together for years, paid bills, shared routines, but love had faded quietly. "Would anyone want to harm you?" the officer asked. I watched him jot notes in his little black notebook, his eyes sharp and unreadable. One name kept echoing in my mind like a bad refrain. Mark Hale, my business partner. He often came over for so-called work meetings. He knew our schedule. I didn't mention him right away because the idea seemed absurd. And yet the clues were lining up: the purse, the jewelry, access to Rachel's belongings. Forensics arrived soon after, taking pictures and collecting evidence. My living room turned into a battlefield of investigators and yellow tape. Within hours, I'd lost what little privacy I had left. The media showed up fast, circling like vultures. A news van parked on the street, and I realized my life was now a public story. That night, I rented a hotel room near the lake, staring at the city lights melting into the rain. The news called it the mannequin mystery case. They said things that sounded ridiculous, yet were shaping the public's imagination. I called my brother, Michael. He was the only person I could trust. He wasn't a man of compromise. He could smell lies from miles away. Michael arrived with a folder. He wore his detective-style jacket like armor. "Sit down," he said flatly, laying out photos of Rachel with Mark. Brutal pictures, lunches together, walks, the kind of looks lovers share. Then more photos, Rachel meeting strangers at cafes, exchanging envelopes. My world cracked open. "Who's this guy?" I asked, pointing at one of the photos. "Luke Kane," Michael replied. "He helps people disappear, new identities, offshore accounts, fake papers." My stomach tightened. So it wasn't just an affair, it was a plan. They'd been preparing to run with everything we had. The evidence showed months of quiet plotting, of secret photos and documents. Anger replaced my shock. While I thought I was securing our future, Rachel was preparing my downfall. Pictures of our bank accounts, scanned files, account numbers, everything had been photographed. She hadn't just fallen out of love, she was erasing me completely. I felt betrayed to the bone. Michael put a hand on my shoulder. "There are two paths," he said. "The law or the response." His tone was dark, the kind that belonged to a man who didn't believe much in court justice. I looked out at the rain hitting the hotel window and knew my life would never go back to what it was. I was facing a choice no one ever teaches you to make. We decided to wait, to watch. The police kept searching, the media kept feeding, and I kept piecing together what was left of my life. Michael dug into records, called contacts, followed leads. I became obsessed with details, with patterns, contradictions. Playing the amateur detective gave me a strange sense of purpose. Then Michael came up with something insane. "If she wants to be dead to the world," he said, "maybe we can turn that against her." The idea thrilled and terrified me. Use her own lie as a weapon, my anger turned into plans. Possibilities. The city wasn't just a dark backdrop anymore. Chicago became a chessboard, and I was ready to make my move. That night, from my hotel window, I looked at the lights of Lakeshore Drive and swore to myself I wouldn't be anyone's victim. I was a betrayed husband, yes, but also a father. Lily, our daughter, deserved the truth. The October wind howled outside like a promise. I didn't know where this road would lead, but I was ready to fight for what was left. The next morning, I was up before sunrise. The city still slept, but the first lights of Chicago diners began to glow. I grabbed my usual coffee at Clark and Madison Diner, a small place where the servers know your name without asking. The air smelled of toast and yesterday's rain. My mind was foggier than the sky. I took out my notebook and wrote everything I knew about Rachel: times, calls, places. I wanted to understand. It was no longer only pain. This had become an investigation. Why cheat? Why the mannequin? Why run? I felt like there was something bigger under the betrayal. Michael met me around 8 with a folder and a hard look. "She withdrew $30,000 in cash last week," he said as he sat down. I almost dropped my cup. "30?" I said. He nodded. And she booked a flight to Los Angeles the night of the accident. My chest tightened. Los Angeles, the place where people start over, where you disappear easily. Do you think she's there? I asked. Michael shrugged. I plan to find out, but she's not alone. The bank records show regular transfers to Mark Hale, your partner. I felt sick. Mark had been my friend for 10 years, shared dinners and laughs. Now it looked like it was all a show. That night I took a flight to Los Angeles. O'Hare was crowded, and everything seemed to move faster than me. Every face in the terminal looked suspicious. I walked through the crowd like a ghost, carrying only a photo of Rachel in my pocket. On the plane, I couldn't sleep. I watched the clouds and wondered if she was looking at the same sky out west. When I landed in L.A., the heat hit me like a slap. It was late October, but California refused to feel like fall. I had the address of a cheap motel in Inglewood, one of those neon vacancy motels that promise little and hide a lot. I needed to stay unnoticed. After a cold shower, I called Michael. "I'm here," I said. "I know," he answered. "Check your messages." He'd sent a blurry security photo, Rachel in a denim jacket near a cafe on Sunset Boulevard. Not alone, Mark walked beside her. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. It was real, not rumor, not a guess. She was smiling. She laughed like everything we had never been together. Anger mixed with a strange curiosity. I couldn't look away. I wanted to run to her and ask why. But Michael warned, "Don't act until we know more." So I waited. 2 days. I followed traces, cafes, parking lots, camera footage. Each time I was late by an hour or two. Chasing them felt like chasing a ghost under a bright sun. On the 3rd day I found them, a seaside restaurant in Santa Monica. Rachel wore a light dress, her hair shone in the light. Mark held her hand. I stayed in my car with the engine off, watching. The scene seemed unreal, like a movie. I wanted it to be a bad scene from a film. But it was my life, and there was no escape. I waited until they left and walked toward the beach. I heard waves and children laughing. Something inside me broke. I stepped out of the car and our eyes met. Her smile vanished. "Ethan," she whispered, pale. Mark moved forward like a protector, but I raised my hand. "Not here, not in front of people." We sat in a nearly empty cafe a few steps from the sand. The silence weighed heavy. Rachel picked at her ring. Mark kept his head down. "You were supposed to be dead," I said. She sighed. "I know." "Why?" I asked. She closed her eyes. "I couldn't live like that anymore, Ethan. I loved you, but I was suffocating. Mark helped me." I stayed silent. Everything inside me fell apart, but I kept still. "You stole from me, Rachel," I said. "You lied, made me look like a fool, and took what we built." She shook her head. "It wasn't against you." I laughed without joy. "Then who was it against? Truth?" A tear rolled down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. Mark finally spoke. "You don't get it, man. She wanted freedom." I looked slowly at him. "Freedom? By stealing money and running? You call that freedom?" My voice trembled. People in the cafe watched us. Rachel stood up fast. "Enough! I didn't want you to suffer." She left. As always, she walked away. I followed her to the beach. She walked fast, hair whipped by the wind. I caught up. "You could have told me," I breathed. "You could have left without destroying me." She stopped and faced me. Her eyes were full of sadness. "I know, but you would never have let me go. You would have begged. I would have waited, and you would have forgiven me again." And she was right. Night fell over the ocean. Waves erased our footprints in the sand. I stayed on the beach long after she left. I didn't know if I was angry or empty. All I knew was I had to go back. Not to Chicago, but to myself, back to who I was before I got lost in a lie. The next day, I took the first flight to Chicago. On the plane, I watched the sunrise above the clouds. The pain was still there, but something inside me had changed. I had seen the truth. Even if it hurt, it freed me. Sometimes you must lose everything to find who you really are. Returning to Chicago was silent. The cold November air bit my face the moment I stepped out of the airport. The streets were covered with dead leaves, the streetlights still on, and everything looked different. It felt like coming back to a city I no longer knew. I had left behind the man I was, and the one who returned didn't know how to live anymore. The apartment felt larger, emptier. The frames on the walls, the books, the cups in the sink, everything still carried Rachel's presence. I sat on the couch, elbows on my knees, listening to the silence. That heavy silence you never notice until there's no one left to talk to. The mannequin had been taken by the police, but its absence still echoed through the room. Michael arrived an hour later. He didn't need me to speak. He saw my eyes, my tired face, and he knew. "You found her, didn't you?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "And she's gone, for good." He sat across from me, sighed, and said softly, "Then now, you have to live. Not for her, for you, for Lily." The name of my daughter hit me like a reminder of what still mattered. Lily, my little 8-year-old girl. She'd been staying with my sister since the accident. She believed her mother was dead. I had let the police keep that story, unable to explain the truth. How do you tell a child that her mother chose to disappear? That night I made a decision. I would tell her the truth, but in my own way. Not everything, just enough for her to understand that life goes on, even when love doesn't. The next morning I went to pick her up. My sister's house smelled like pancakes and coffee. Lily ran to me, her brown hair messy, and hugged me tightly. "Daddy!" she shouted. I lifted her into my arms. "I missed you, Princess." She smiled, and that smile healed a part of me I thought was gone. We went for a walk in the park like we used to. The cold wind tangled her hair, and she laughed without knowing the weight I was carrying. "Daddy," she said suddenly, "do you miss Mommy?" The question cut through me. I looked at her, searching for the right words. "Yes," I said finally. "I miss her, but sometimes people have to leave to find their way, and it's not your fault or mine." She nodded slowly, as if she understood more than I wanted her to. After that day, something shifted. I stopped seeing myself as a victim. I had been betrayed, lied to, used, but I wasn't destroyed. I was still alive. And as long as I breathed, I had something to build. I went back to work in my garage. I cleaned, fixed, rebuilt engines as if I were repairing my own soul. The sound of tools filled the silence that once haunted me. One night, as I was closing the garage, I heard a knock on the door, the same sound that had changed my life weeks before. My heart raced. When I opened it, it wasn't an officer this time. It was a delivery man holding an unmarked envelope. "For you, Mr. Miller," he said, before walking away. I stood under the harsh light of the neon, staring at that envelope like it was a message from another world. Inside was a photo, Rachel and Lily, taken years ago by Lake Michigan. On the back were just a few words. "I'm sorry. Take care of her. R." My heart tightened. No address, no return, just those words. A tear rolled down my cheek, but it wasn't from pain this time. It was from peace. Proof she was still out there somewhere, that she hadn't erased everything after all. That night, I stepped outside. The icy wind hit my face, but I breathed deeply. The city was alive, bright, full of people, cars, distant music. I was one of them now. Just a man among others with scars and a story, but still standing. I looked up at the lights of Chicago and knew life would go on. Not the same, but still worth living. Weeks passed. I worked hard, took Lily to school, learned to laugh again. Sometimes I looked at that photo on my desk and whispered, "I forgive you. Not for her, but for me." Because forgiveness is the only way to move forward without drowning in the past. Rachel had made her choice, and now I had made mine, to live. One morning in December, the first snow began to fall. Lily ran outside into the yard, laughing under the flakes. I watched her from the window, a cup of coffee warming my hands, and something new stirred inside me. It wasn't pure joy, but it was close. It was peace. The kind that comes when you finally accept that some stories don't have happy endings, but they still lead to a new beginning. I picked up the phone and called Michael. "You know what?" I said. "I think I'm okay." He was silent for a moment, then replied, "That's the best news I've heard in a long time." We talked for hours about everything and nothing, like brothers rediscovering the simple joy of being alive. When I hung up, the snow was falling harder. The world felt new again. That night, before going to bed, I wrote in my notebook, "Love can break, trust can die, but the heart learns to beat differently. And sometimes, that new rhythm is the real rebirth." I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and let the quiet night surround me. Peaceful, calm, and alive. Because in that moment I knew I had survived my own storm.